people can make sure you have the posting on the refrigerator that tells you which things are compostable versus recyclable versus which things have to go in the trash. So having a visual reminder is always good for the whole family.
Well, peer pressure always works. So if you can do it and then look at your friends and say, this is a good thing to do. We should all be doing this because it's money. You're saving money and energy. So if you can make a connection between the way we treat resources and saving money and saving resources and, kind of cutting emissions, it depends who you're talking to. But I think at home, too, having a schedule of who's taking out the recycling, who's in charge of the compost. We encourage people to use composting in their garden so that all the kitchen waste can be used right in your backyard, and then compost the pizza boxes and the materials that can't be, that need commercial. Like we were at Jerry's today, and on the soup that we ate, it said, this container is industrially compostable. It's not the kind of thing that you'd throw in your backyard pile. So I think having people understand the nuances of recycling and composting, what's the best way to keep it as close to home as possible. And then they didn't have a place for composting. So I said, well, you might want to talk to the manager because you're spending a lot of money buying this compostable material and all they have is one big trash container. What are people going to do? So I said, how many people are asking you about it? He said, we've been hearing from others, so I'll talk to the manager. So, just getting the conversation rolling is always a big thing.
Once people get in the habit at home, then they start looking for it every place else. I think I remember you guys saying, why do you want to do recycling and composting here? Well, you do it at home. It's natural. It's what you expect to do. So once you're used to it, it's a habit you want to keep every place you go.
The other thing about improving recycling and composting is buying products that you can recycle, compost, or reuse. Because cutting down on everything is really the best thing. If we have to recycle and compost, that's good, but reusing is even better. And then not buying in the first place is the best, but we need stuff, right? We're alive. We need to eat.
Biggest enemy of recycling. One would be availability. So the example of being at Jerry's today where we were all set to do the right thing and there wasn't even a container for it. So that's one thing. And the other is, people not being sure what they're supposed to do. So I'll just toss it all in one because I don't know what to do. Or maybe they don't care. But I think more often it's because they don't know what to do.
I think the biggest enemy of recycling is that people are in a hurry and they don't really think about it. So it's again, thoughts precede actions, and you have to talk about things to create your thinking, and then actions will follow. So we can't blame people because they do the wrong thing. We just have to get them to think more about that, and that only happens when there's conversations.
And you have to make it convenient. If the trash can is here and the only recycling bin is at the opposite end of the school or the opposite end of the place where you are, and you're in a hurry, you don't have time to go to where the recycling is. So if you want people to recycle, it has to be available every place where they might want to recycle.
It's a consciousness thing, and the consciousness is raising, and as it gets there and people see that everyone is doing it, it used to be weird to recycle, and now everyone does it. So we want it to be weird, to not recycle.
Just in neighborhoods, the neighbors used to talk about who's that weird family that has that extra bin out by the curb, and now it's like, who's that family that doesn't have a recycling bin? Why don't they have a recycling bin? So it's shifted just by what seems normal to people.
Well, the other thing is, as people change their lifestyles to become more sustainable, they also need to be involved as good community citizens. And what we work on is you have to put a price on pollution. You can't continue to pollute for free. So putting a price on carbon and then returning that money to the economy to stimulate good thinking projects is really important. And we're now finding bipartisan support for this with Republicans and Democrats. So we're seeing it happen, but it'll happen faster if more people are talking, to their leaders. Mm-hmm. And we can do that right here in the city by asking Edina to send a message to our federal government that, cities need your help. We need to put a price on carbon.
If there's a price on carbon, it makes it more expensive to make new things, and there will be more recycling. Recycling will become more valuable because creating products from new materials will get more expensive. So it'll actually help increase our desire to be recycling because it'll have more of a monetary value. Because I met places along the bike trip, I was in Washington State, and they said we don't recycle glass anymore because it's too expensive from our small city to ship it to where it can actually be recycled. And they used to collect it and just crush it and use it in the roadways, but they now had more than they could ever use. And this was in wine country, so we're going past all these wineries, which means they're all buying brand new glass to put their wine in, and right now that was cheaper than having a way to recycle the glass. That's when I knew there was something wrong with the system, that it was cheaper for them to buy new glass all the time instead of wanting to have recycled glass.
And with plastic, there's too much plastic in the recycling stream. I don't know how many billions of water bottles there are in our country alone, but much of that can only be stored because there's just no market for that much plastic, and plastic is fossil fuels. So if all of a sudden a plastic water bottle, is another 10, 20 cents, it's like when cigarettes go up, people cut back on smoking. Same thing with anything. So we just want to make the marketplace make sense, for the markets of the future, which are not going to be, it'll be a low carbon economy, not just cheaper or more expensive gas.
The government doesn't create the political will, the people do. So we first start by pushing our representatives and our leaders to tell them that this is an important issue, because they've got lots of issues to pay attention to. So we need to help them see that climate change and putting a price on carbon, that's the most important thing, to create that political will. And then with that, that's when they start looking at, okay, so what could we do about it? And now we have these elder Republican leaders that are saying this is a good idea. And if we want to get rid of the regulations that we don't like, then we need to have an insurance policy against causing more harm on this planet. So we need to have a price on carbon that helps shift us in the right direction. So I find it really exciting that they're talking about it now, and that they're looking at, okay, this is the way that we think is a really good idea for solving this problem. Good. Anything that helps us solve the problem is a positive step forward.
Now that new people are talking about a carbon tax, and it's not really a tax if the government doesn't keep the money. So that's why we call our proposal carbon fee and dividend. So giving the money directly back to people is important, because then they're going to feel good about, okay, prices are going up and I have more money. So I'm going to stop buying those things that are hurting the environment and start investing in solar and wind and all the new technology and the new products that are coming up that can help people. So it's all connected to the economic welfare, and that all people should be a part of it, so that Bill Gates and your families would get the same check. It's not showing favorites of poor people or rich people or people who use a lot of carbon or a little bit of carbon. So it's equal across the board. But then we'll see what people do with their dividend. Will they invest it in something smart, or will they buy a Hummer and continue to pay high price for gasoline?
Money motivates people in many ways. So if we can make the right choice, the cheaper choice, then people will just choose it because it's cheaper. And those people that really cared to find out what was the right choice, they're going to be happy too, because it makes it easier. It's another one of those convenience things.
Removing the stigma that this is a liberal or a conservative issue, that it's a human issue, that there is no planet B to go to, even though some people think going to Mars or the moon is an alternative. You got to have a few $1 billion to do that kind of stuff. Plus, it's not much fun. You can't play Frisbee or golf up on the moon. There's nothing there to do. So, making this truly the human issue of our time, and how it could lead to equality for people, and cut back on wars and the whole thing. So this is very connected to all of the problems that are happening. Mm-hmm. And many of the refugee problems in the world now are connected to drought, fires, rising seas. So we're only starting to see that now. So the more we act now, the more we remove the dangers for the future. So it's smart to move quickly now.
When you think about going to Mars, in order to get there, we have to figure out how we can create a very sustainable spaceship that gets us there. We have to figure out how we create water and recycle all of our waste and reuse everything in order to just even make the trip to Mars. And that kind of thinking then shifts into our everyday lives too. It doesn't just become what we need to do to get to Mars. It becomes, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. Why aren't we doing this everywhere?
We light a fire under you. That's the biggest thing we can do, is to really get people to see that it takes everybody doing what turns them on. And whether it's through sports or through food or through transportation. Mindy's now a transportation commissioner for the city of Edina as of today. So I find, and I think we find, working with young people is the most exciting thing, because you're the ones who are going to really be the architects of the new culture. And I can just keep skiing and playing Frisbee, and we work on this because I work on this because it's fun. It stresses her out a lot, but I think it's really cool that we can be out, and that people like that guy, our neighbor, comes up and he says, I've been meaning to talk to you, because we talked to him 2 years ago about his solar panels. Now he wants to get more involved.
We started collecting letters to people's members of Congress, and we collected almost 200 of them at the Lopet, and we collected over 500 of them at the Berkey, and then how many others we've been doing at other places lately. So we've got 700 letters to deliver to members of Congress from people that are saying this is an important issue.
We have people in D.C. delivering those letters to Eric Paulson today.
Yeah.
So we're getting people locally that haven't been really active on climate all of a sudden saying, this is something, they're excited about doing now. A lot of people now are talking about the Berkey, because 13,000 skiers all of a sudden were without their event.
They were really disappointed.
So now skiers are more
They
like
had
polar
fun,
bears.
a lot of them had fun anyhow, but
Yeah.
people were really disappointed.
Yeah, they spend all their time training and spending all their money to, do that, and then, sorry guys, we have to not do the race because there's no snow.
We recycle and we compost at home. We have composting in the backyard as well as commercial composting.
We grow food.
We grow some of our own food. We have a membership in a community-supported agriculture farm, so most of our other vegetables we get locally. I love to bike, and one of the things I'm excited about then, by being a transportation commissioner, I can help advocate for safer biking within the city of Edina, because it's something I enjoy doing. I'm out there a lot. I can kind of give my thoughts on things that work well in the biking infrastructure and things that don't, that can help more people feel comfortable biking.
We do wind source with Excel on our bill. I look at my
Subscribe
bill every
to-
month, and I know exactly how much energy we're using. We're doing community solar, and our usage is very small, but and we use our little solar panels to charge our cell phones. So we've got 6 of those little Gold Zero panels, and now we're selling them to other people. You can be a small-scale solar producer.
Yeah.
Really small, but it's something. So the little things add up to.
Rain barrels too.
I want to do, something with my government. So getting the kids up in front of the city council, meeting with Frank Hornstein and writing carbon tax for the state of Minnesota. Our volunteers are doing that. I love it when something gets started and I don't have to do it, because then it tells me that it's really working, that other people are taking it on.
I definitely think there's been an increased awareness, especially, this winter in Minnesota was so different with so little snow and rain on Christmas, rain in February. It's climate change especially has become, very apparent to people. They might like the fact that it seems warmer. Sometimes that's kind of nice that we didn't have to go through the super cold winter in Minnesota. But I think people recognize there's a change happening here, and maybe we do need to start talking about it. So it definitely feels like for 10 years we've been working on this issue, and it really feels like things are shifting. this year, that more people are aware, more people want to know, what can I do? Like our neighbor that, sees us here and stops us and says, what can I do about this? And another neighbor that was at the meeting we were presenting this morning to a group of women, and one of them was our neighbor, and she said, I've known you've been working on this stuff, but I didn't really know what you did until now.
The growing season in Minnesota this year was 32 days longer than average in 1 year. All of a sudden it was like picking raspberries in November. Mm-hmm. That's what I was doing.
We got a second crop of raspberries.
So you can more people can see the impact on the animals and the plants and the weather. As skiers, we got it down now. This is 3 years in a row, no skiing on snow, all on artificial snow, which I'm grateful for, but it's expensive. So there's a cost to all of these things, and when people see the cost, in dollars and cents, then they'll take more action. It's changing quickly, and at the same time, the solutions. You look at the trends in commerce now. Renewables are going like this, fossil fuels are going like that. So it's very clear that the shift going on is dramatic.
There's newer and bigger wind turbines that have been developed that there's not many of them. Well, we met a guy that worked at the Lopet. We met a guy that used to work in the factory that makes wind turbine blades that's in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And the company that he worked for is a company in Denmark, and their facility in Denmark has made the world's longest wind turbine blade now for an installation in Denmark. So they're bigger wind turbines that generate like twice as much energy as the ones currently. And solar panels have gotten much better. I mean, we have solar panels on the city hall. We have solar panels on my church that now are almost 20 years old, and the technology now is so much better and so much more efficient in generating electricity. And the portable solar panels that you can take everywhere, they work well, they're readily available, you see them a lot more often. I'm starting to see backpacks that have solar panels built into them. They make really thin solar film that can go on windows that could generate energy. So there are also things that are just in development that are happening. I was looking for virtual reality games that might do things about climate change, and there's an institute at Stanford that's working on how do you create virtual reality games that help people kind of be immersed in what's happening with climate change in places outside of where they live, so they can get an idea of, like, do a dive at a coral reef and see how it's changed from one time period to another, so that they can see how things are changing and what it's impacting. And we could create those kinds of virtual reality of what might the future look like to get people excited about, what might your life be like if you lived in a more sustainable lifestyle? How would you get to school? What might school look like? What would you do when you have breakfast in the morning? To give people that kind of immersion experience to get them excited about it.
I just see the young people that are getting involved in this on a deeper level are always thinking about using the technology, to help either talk about it or develop programs that would be able to save energy or inspire people. We had a guy up at the Berkey this year who's making a film called Saving Snow. So we showed his movie Facing the Surge, which talked about sea level rise in Virginia. Now he's making a movie showing the economic impact when tourists and mountain communities lose their snow, that the cost is millions of dollars in tourism and lodging and food. The Berkey suffered from that this year, although many people came up because they weren't sure if it was going to snow, and it didn't, so they were there. But next year some of those people won't register because they're going to wonder, is this going to keep happening? And I think absolutely it's going to keep happening. We're not sure exactly when, but just like the snowstorm that didn't come, maybe next year we'll get the snowstorm. So it's not always about not having things, it could be having too much, like rain. The flooding is, like in California now, the flooding is going to be intense this year because of all the snowpack and all of the extra rain that's coming in because of more moisture in the atmosphere. So it's all connected, and we all pay the price. So last night in Maple Grove they had an event called climate change is costing you, in some way, taxes, hardship, your neighbors, people are paying for it. So it's on the move in both directions. So it's a race against time, and that's what we have to do. So getting people to just commit a little bit of time once a month to write a letter and to do something is a good thing to do. When you think of the earth is in cycles. You know, we go through seasons, we go through a day, we go through night. So everything is always in cycles, I guess clockwise more often than counterclockwise. So when you think of, you know, everything we use to put that into the cycle so that it will come back to you again. So it's more a feeling like you're in the flow of everything moving, but nothing gets wasted. So our friends talk about zero waste. And I think if we're really, you know, in the flow of using and reusing, and it's like sharing energy. It could be sharing, you know, our feelings too. That in a way that's kind of, you know, that's recycling what's going on inside of me. And as we grow older, you're more aware, you know, of the importance of leaving something that future generations, like if I know that you guys are going to grow up and be good citizens, it makes me feel really good, because as a teacher, I've recycled my energy. And I meet my second grade students who are now 45 years old, and they're raising their families, and they say, oh, I remember recycling back in second grade. That was really a big deal with Mr. Paul. And that makes me feel really good. Mm-hmm. So that's my idea. It's more of a consciousness thing and about how we think.
Mm-hmm. There's a great book called Cradle to Cradle, that instead of looking at how we make things and them being, we usually talk about cradle to grave when they talk about the production life cycle of something. And they think of it from when it gets created until it gets thrown away. And now the idea of cradle to cradle is that there's no such thing as waste, that all waste gets reused into something else. And this book goes through all these examples of places where they've set up like 3 factories together so that what becomes kind of the waste from one becomes the inputs to another one. So sometimes, you know, in order to cool down their machinery, they might use water, and the water, when it comes out, it's hotter. And usually they would have just pumped that into a waterway somewhere. Well, instead, this next factory actually needs warm water, and instead of them having to use as much energy to heat it up, they're taking the water that's already been warmed up from the previous factory and using it in the beginning of their cycle. And how do we take, you know, all the elements from our phone when we're done with it, and take all of those pieces out and use them again in the next manufacturing process?
One of the things that was really interesting that I learned about is that there was a school that had a problem with their greenhouse, and the greenhouse was too cold. And then they had another problem where the computers were so hot that they were making the classroom too warm. So they moved the computers off-site. You could still use them, but the heat from the computers filled up this other area that then they used as a greenhouse. And so they grew the plants with the computers to use that heat. Plants grew better, classrooms got cooler. And I was like, that was the first time I think, and this was many years ago, and I thought there was some smart engineer that saw problem, put them together and came up with 2 solutions. So that's your job. Find problems, create solutions without having to do anything except think.